when you're starting up and growing a business, you've got to have that belief in yourself. You have to bring in people around you who are more experienced than you and fill the gaps that you have. And you have to be honest with yourself about what gaps do you have and what are you good at and what are you not good at. I mean, I'm hopeless at detail. I don't do detail. So I employ someone. You handle that. Yeah, I employ someone that does detail because otherwise I spend too much time trying to make myself do it. So you have to learn what you're good at and what you need to do and what you need to let go of. You need to bring good people around you, and you also need to keep growing. So you don't want to sort of get to a point and stop.
Yeah.
So you need to be constantly looking, well, what's next?
Welcome to the Growth Trust podcast series, which focuses on issues and challenges facing many small and medium business enterprises, which play such a vital role in the Australian economy. Small businesses contribute more than $500 billion to the local economy. Here at the Growth Trust podcast, we aim to pass on critical knowledge, skills and values, enabling those watching or listening to take their company to the next level. This podcast is brought to you by the Australian Centre for Business Growth, which was established by the University of South Australia almost a decade ago. Over that time, the Centre's delivered world-class business growth programs, providing business owners, CEOs, managing directors and their executive team members with the knowledge and skills needed to grow their companies. The topic today, from startup to grow up to stay up. In other words, how to start a business, grow it successfully and ensure its success is sustainable for the long term. In the studio with me is the Centre's Director, Ryan Williams, and someone who knows a lot about starting, growing and selling sustainable business enterprises, growth expert, Anne Angel. So, from startup to grow up to stay up. Firstly, to you, Ryan Williams, as Director of the Australian Centre for Business Growth, you deal with many SMEs. What does the Centre offer when it comes to today's theme, startup, grow up, stay up?
Most of our focus, Ron, is on the grow up and stays up bit. I think the failure rates in startups are very, very high, probably depending on the jurisdiction or area you'd look at, anywhere between 80 and 90%. And those failures happen for a myriad of reasons. Folks come up with an idea or a product or service that doesn't resonate with the target customer, or they can't get enough financial support, or they can't find a way to produce or manufacture, the timing is off. Now, we choose to focus on the growth side and sustainable growth that SMEs can go through as a way to build greater productivity and capacity in society. If you've got more people employed, gainfully employed, feeling productive in environments where they're happy to come to work and they feel like they're making a difference and earning a fair wage, that lifts the level of prosperity and kind of mental wellness for communities at scale. We've seen this happen in other markets. So we choose to focus on there because we think that's where we can make the most impact.
And what sort of programs do you offer to ensure that a company starts well, then grows and is sustainable?
Yep. So we deliver 3 programs at the moment, principally. One is an assessment clinic. That's a one-day session just with a CEO where we can have some foundational knowledge. Of course, you're not going to change the world with a day's worth of engagement, but provides a little bit of time and a window into that particular leader's business, a little bit of a window into some of the foundational things that we think are important for a leader. It allows them to, I guess, look us in the eyes and say, is this for me? And for us to look them in the eyes and go, are you up to this? Mm-hmm. And then we've got 2 longer follow-on programs. One's for smaller businesses called the Growth Ramp. That's for companies with between 5 and 12 FTEs, typically the CEO alone. That runs over 6 months with coaching in between. And then we've got a program for larger businesses. I'd say probably the medium number of FTEs there is about 35 or 40. And that runs over 9 months for the CEO or MD or owner, together with at least 2 members of their leadership team. So they learn and create their growth planning together.
So, Anne Angel, you're here as the growth expert, and obviously you help implement some of these programs.
Sure.
Let's get a handle on your business background. I was interested to hear before we got underway that you were a teacher initially.
Yes.
But you've had a remarkable business career, jumping from all kinds of different businesses. What have you picked up along the way that you pass on through these programs?
So, as we talked about, my teaching background helps you articulate pass on information, ask clever questions, sort of hone those skills so that you can actually talk to companies and get them to think about, well, why are they doing the things that they're doing, and pose questions to them that make them go back and think. And you have to pose the question in, it's not an attack, it's not a, you shouldn't be doing that. It's a, well, can we just think about that? And are there other ways of doing it? So you're kind of encouraging them to think a little bit deeper. So it sort of comes back to teaching, is you want people to actually think a little bit further, a little bit deeper. I've done a lot of international work. So working with different cultures in different environments, that actually is also something that's really important and brings a different understanding. How do you approach different markets? Different countries, different cultures have different requirements. So it's all sort of what comes to that you bring to the programs.
But you've had a remarkable career. You're involved in the video business. You've been involved in a whole range of different companies. Just give us a bit of an insight into some of the things you work with.
Yeah, so as I said, I did teaching, and then I worked for a video company. We sold video recorders, and I was the only female there, so that was kind of interesting. Then I moved to the Sesquicentenary, which was South Australia's 150th. Then I moved into venture capital, did some venture capital work, and I did some work with the federal government. The original video laser company, I worked for a laser company. When they went broke, my business partner and I bought one of the products, and then we've taken that product to the international market. It's a medical device, so we've had to do all the clinical trials and all the regulatory approvals, and we've just got approval to sell that into Korea. So for all of the things I've been doing, and when I'm teaching and working in the program, I'm actually doing it as well. So you're passing on hard-won knowledge. Because I don't mean this to be offensive, but some people might sit back and say, well, what would a chalkie know about lasers? What would a chalkie know about all of these different things? But essentially the skills maybe that a teacher learns is really about, as you say, how to ask appropriate questions, or get people to ask appropriate questions, but also how to sell something, to sell an idea. Exactly, because in teaching, you're selling the concepts, because you're selling the idea of it's good to learn. You're not selling this is 1 + 1 = 2. You're selling, if you know how to do this, you can do these other things. So, and that's what marketing is all about. You're not selling the core of what's 1 + 1, but you're selling, if you know what that is, then you can do all these other things. So you've got to sell what people want to buy, or what their aspirations will be if they have that product or service. So think about, and one of the most successful advertising campaigns in Australia was the Jeep campaign. Yeah. And of course the Jeep campaign, they weren't selling cars. In fact, they hardly even mentioned the car. It was, if you have a Jeep, you'll have this fantastic lifestyle. You'll never be home, your lawn will grow. And so they weren't selling cars, they were selling what you get if you have a Jeep. So getting that message across to the people in the program is to think about what kinds of things people can do or have if they have your product. So selling what your product brings to people, not your product.
It's interesting you should mention that, because sometimes I've found with people who invent something, they can't understand why the world hasn't taken to this. But in a sense, they're not asking the right question. They're not asking, have I invented something that people want?
No, what they're doing is they're selling the features and benefits of the product, and they go in and they educate, or they're just selling the features and benefit of the product. And back in venture capital days, I had a company that came to us that wanted some money, and he told me that the state government was about to buy his product. He said, every time I meet with them, they tell they're very interested and they're very excited about the product. And I said, well, before we invest, do you mind if I ring the government? And he said, no. So I spoke to this government department. He said, oh, yes, that guy, we love him. He's fantastic. Every time he comes in, we learn more. And I said, well, are you ever going to buy the product? And he said, no, we're never going to buy the product. And I was like, well, so this guy who had been trying to sell, what he thought was he was trying to sell the product for 3 or 4 years, he was going nowhere. And I had to go back to him and say, have you ever asked them to buy? Have you ever asked them, when are they going to buy? Yeah. Or what would he need to do to get them to buy? He'd never asked any of those important questions.
So to you, Ryan, people like Anne's experience are fundamental as growth experts to pass on these sorts of insights to people. Because I dare say with entrepreneurs and those starting up a business, they're overwhelmed with the enthusiasm for their product, but maybe they need a realist to sit them down and say, mate, you've invented something that no one really needs or wants, or if you tweak it ever so slightly, you could really hit pay dirt.
I think an entrepreneur's never short of advice. There's always plenty of people that will tell you what you should be doing. And to Anne's point, I think what's different about what we do at the centre is this idea of what's the foundational knowledge, what's the practical stuff that you need to know, and how do we get that realization through the art of good questions in a curated environment so that you're not telling somebody what they should be doing. Telling somebody doesn't make it sticky. They have to kind of feel it for themselves. And the same is true when you're running a business. How you empower your staff or how you help folks get along on a journey. There's no point in me saying, here are the company values and I've printed a poster and I've put them on the wall. Yeah. And now we all have values. That doesn't work. You have to kind of create an environment where you say, this is the culture we'd like in the organization for the following reasons. Let's all be involved in that discussion and see how we journey along. I recall in one business where we were teeing up a culture and value sort of etch-a-sketch moment, a rebrand, if you want, for how we behave internally. I had the exec team and the board were all quite keen to be prescriptive. I said, well, our teams are the people that have to live and breathe this. Why don't we ask them? And so we went out, and probably 1,000 people in that company, and said, we're going to have 4 values. You choose 3 that you think we should be living by. What customer value you want to have, what product value we have, how you want to engage with each other in the organization. And we as the leadership team, together with the board, will add 1. Yeah. So that was our kind of safety net to catch maybe something that we figured the staff would miss. But by going through that process, you have a whole bunch of people who've engaged and committed to and understand where you're going. And I think that's part of that journey when you're helping folks understand what they should be doing in their business or how they could be improving their business. It's not to tell them what to do, but to help in that journey of discovery.
But that's one of the really good things about the centre, because you bring in teams of people. So all of our programs are group, so groups of company. And what the companies get from each other is enormous. So because it's always interesting when you sit and you listen to someone present their business plan or present what their marketing strategy is, and you can pick, oh, that's wrong, that's not going to work. And it makes you reflect back on yourself. So sometimes just listening to what the other 4 or 5 companies say and do helps people reflect back on themselves. And we also create that bit of peer tension. So they're not doing it for us. They're doing it to stand out in front of their peers and say, well, yeah, we're going to do this, and we have done it in the last 3 months. We've achieved this and we've achieved that. So it's not necessarily for us, but it's to actually stand out in front of their peers. And the amount of inspiration that they get from each other, even in the growth, but all of the programs are in a group environment. They get an enormous amount from the other companies, and we encourage that group think. A good session for me is when I haven't had to say much, when they've been talking to each other.
Feed off. Yeah, go on.
Just riffing on something that you were saying earlier about the sales process. Oftentimes these businesses, when they're in that theme of kind of grows up and stays up, marketing and sales is central to that. If you're not driving revenue growth, profitable revenue growth over the long term, your business is nowhere, Joe. You can't save your way to prosperity. That's a short-term fix for things. And good cost management and being efficient, that's a really good discipline. But that's not going to drive your business forward for the next decade. And in that sales process, moving beyond on the customer journey, that moving beyond the features and benefits piece of, so this is the experience that you get in the programs with us, or this is what my widget does. It's shifting gears to that conversation around what is the customer value? What's the need that we're solving for somebody else? If you can show somebody directly or indirectly how they benefit, the Jeep example you used earlier. And I think it's the same when you think about our programs, the experience of having a safe space as a community of other leaders and going, oh, gee, I've got a plumbing business and that chap's in a tech company and that lady over there's running a healthcare business or whatever it is. and she's got the same staffing issue that I've got.
Yeah.
Oh,
How'd you deal with that?
That's how that chap solved it over there. And that kind of feeding off of each other and co-solving, I think, is one of the what the customer values coming through that process or journey.
Well, let's play a little practical exercise here. I'm a newbie. I've come to the centre. I'm involved in training people to get ready for media interviews and things like that. And I come to you, and I've established the business to a certain level, but I want to take it to another level. What happens to me? What do you do?
I mean, what I would want to ask of you is that, well, who is your target customer?
Yeah.
And what is your target customer looking for? And I don't want you to say, oh, well, my target customer is any person between the age of 25 and 50 who has to speak.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, that's big picture.
Yeah.
But who's your real target customer? You're talking about you want to sell to politicians.
So you really zero in on.
You really have to zero in on, well, who is you really, and then what matters to those people?
Yeah.
So that you're asking questions about, well, your target customer, what values, what are they looking for? And you also have to reflect back on you as what is it that you're really good at?
Yeah.
What is the key thing that you do, and what sets you apart from all the other people that do media training?
But how do I get that level of advice? Because that's a hard conversation to have. Maybe I don't have any, maybe I'm deluding myself.
It's a conversation. So we would say to you, well, if you don't know, you have to find out.
Yes.
We want you to go out and talk.
So do some survey work.
Go and talk to some customers. Find out what they thought,
what they thought let them down.
And what they valued. So we say you have to go and ask three things, right? What did you love about what we did?
Yeah.
What do you wish I did more of?
Yes.
And what do you wish I'd stopped doing?
Yeah, right, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So we give them those three kind of key questions to ask people. And the important thing is to listen and not talk.
But so I'm in one of these sessions. These are great bits of advice. You've got other people from different industries talking about their experiences, but how could they possibly impinge on the sort of work that I do if they're involved in, I don't know, marketing sports goods or something, where's the connection there?
Sometimes they're a customer.
Yeah.
Or a potential customer.
Yeah.
So they say, well, what matters to me is ABC, or what I would be looking for is XYZ.
Yeah.
So they have some insights if they're in the target market.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not in the target market, but often there is someone in the room that's in the target market.
Yeah. Sorry to push for some free advice but I think it's a great way to illustrate.
You're going to start a business, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I have, and I've taken on board a few things you've said, but it's a great way to illustrate to people watching this podcast the sorts of things that you would microscopically drill down on.
Well, and I guess there's the other lens on that is it's not only just asking you the questions. There's the accountability piece. So it's you've gone away, you're back in the next session. So
what'd you find out?
Yeah.
What'd they tell you?
Please tell everybody what you. So we're trying to hold you accountable to make sure.
That's a tough conversation to have then revealed it. Well, they didn't think this went well, and
100% right.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's two things that come out of that. One is actually what you learned through going through the process, but there's also learning to be accountable and actually doing what you say you're going to do. Because I can't recall the stat. It's something like 75% of all business failures are not a failure of strategy; they're a failure of implementation.
Right.
And so it's great to have these discussions about what we should be doing or could be doing, but if you don't actually do anything about it, they're just discussions.
Yeah.
We had a session that we were running last year. I'd popped my head into. I think you and Hock actually were running the session. One of the companies in there, I'd said to the CEO, well, what was your aha moment over the 2 days of content?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, Alan and Hock were amazing. There were some great discussions. The bit that really struck home was when we got to the end of day 2 and the instruction was, right, so you've got tomorrow morning off to work on your next quarter's business plan and you're going to present back tomorrow afternoon. And he said, all of a sudden, it was we have to stop talking about this. And I need to write down, well, what are we going to do by Friday?
Yeah.
And what are we doing by the end of next week? And what are we doing by the end of next month? And you're like, this actually translates into something real.
And they're realistic expectations, not pie in the sky stuff.
Yeah,
no, we question. So if we say, well, you really think you can achieve that?
Yeah.
And of course, at the beginning of the next session, they have to report on what they achieved against what they said they were going to do.
Yeah.
So it becomes, but it also comes back to the peer thing, because if we only had one company and they just had to present back to Ryan and I, then they could just present and it would be, we might ask a few questions. But when you present to some peers and you go, wow, their business plan was they went into a lot more, I need to lift my game because I don't want to be the worst. I want to be the best.
No, I could imagine many people sitting there thinking, wow, they've really drilled down into what they do. Mine is very nebulous and vague, so it gives them a pointer to
and we don't
have
to say anything because that feeling comes out. And so by the time you get to the third module, those presentations are slick.
Yeah.
The first one sometimes is a bit, you have a couple of shaky people, but by the time we get to the third one, those presentations have got really slick and they really know that they're going to be held to account.
And getting back to the teaching point, they know how to sell what they're doing.
Yes.
So, I've often thought with businesses, it strikes me sometimes they get so used to doing what they're doing that they've forgotten what it is that they sell.
Yes.
And so when you quiz them about things, they think, what is it that we do? They're so immersed in the minutiae of what they do on a daily basis that they've forgotten the bigger picture. So you're saying the sessions crystallise their notions about how they sell their business in future.
Yeah, and that question that I asked you about, well, what are you good at?
Yeah.
What sets you apart from everyone else? And that's a really interesting question to pose because a lot of them go, what are we good at? I mean, how are we different from the competitors?
Well, they're great insights into, people who start up a business and then, grow that business. But how about this for a question? Why should we grow the business? I mean, if we got to a certain point we're coasting, what's wrong with that?
So when you were asking Anne earlier about what sort of questions we'd ask off the bat, normally the very first one I ever ask somebody is, well, where do you want to be?
Yeah.
What are you doing this for?
Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Do you want to grow a business that you can sell? Buy several yachts on an island somewhere? I saw some photographs this week of, I think it's Steve Jobs' daughter's yacht that's drifted into Cairns. It's an epic monster.
Yeah.
And why are you doing this? Do you want to buy that yacht? Or do you want to pass something on to your kids as a legacy thing?
Yeah.
There's what we would frame as a lifestyle business in Australia. So, doing this because I want a job but I don't want a boss.
Yeah.
That's a fundamental conversation. And if you're not clear about why you're getting into it, because the strategies that you would adopt to grow your business are going to be different depending on what your end goal is. Why should we be doing it? Some of us do it because it's fun. I've done it because I like solving puzzles. I've kind of come to the realization that that's been my driver over the years without realizing it.
Yeah. I suppose we shouldn't avoid ego.
Oh, absolutely.
Ego, like if a company went belly up and you've taken it over and you want to prove that these people are onto something, they just didn't have the skills at that time to get it up and running, there's nothing wrong with that either.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think one of the really sad things is when you see a company that's been running for a long time and it's sort of stagnating to a certain extent, but everyone's had a good lifestyle and the owner of the business wants to retire and they can't do anything other than shut it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really sad because, and we've had a lot of those that have come through the centre where we ask that question, well, what do you want? And it's like, I want to sell it. And they might say that. And we say, well, okay, what can we do to help you maximise that? What intellectual property do you have? And help them build a structure around their business that actually allows them to get a decent price and position it for sale.
Yeah, professionalise the business so that you're able to hand it off. Yeah.
Because I think I get very sad when, particularly engineering businesses,
a lifetime's work that just when the principal folds it up, it just folds.
Yeah.
There's all those, which brings me to another point, Ryan. A point that you made in a recent article. You were quoted as saying that managers have a moral obligation to develop their good ideas beyond the lifestyle business phase and into a high growth organisation, thereby employing more people, increasing prosperity and adding to the greater good. Is that all part of the centre's approach to this start up, grow up, stay up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll frame this. We were looking at some stats, the Australian landscape as at 2022 versus the US landscape. Like, what's the differential in companies? 88%, 90% of Australian business enterprises, so excluding the non-employing kind of family trust and so on, but trading businesses, are all micro enterprise, so 1 to 4 employees.
Yeah.
In the US, that number's closer to 70. And if you look at the small size organizations, so 5 to 19 staff, In Australia, that's about another 8%. In the US, that's like 20. And so you've got a far bigger, and then mid-sized enterprises, again, it's kind of 8% in the US versus I think 2% here. You've got a far bigger cohort of larger employers in the US. And those businesses create a flywheel effect. They've got more cash reserve to withstand externalities and shocks that come in that they can't control. That means that you've got greater job security over time. It means you've got a more defensible tax base. You'll have more diversity in your economy, so your overall economy is more robust. Something like 65%, 70% of all export that goes out of Australia is minerals.
Yeah.
You know, what are we doing with all of the intellectual capability that we have in this country? We've got some really smart people here, some amazing entrepreneurs, great higher education institutions, folks that have value to add to the rest of the world. And we don't focus on that. So I think that there's, as I called in that article, a moral obligation. I think there's an obligation to grow this, to create an economy that's sustainable and that can create benefit for generations to come, not just for here and now. And when lifestyle-oriented businesses that shut down at the end because the founder or owner is stepping out, there might be 3, 4, 5, 10 people working in that business that are now, that's it. Well, what do I go and do? Occasionally one or two of them might get up to go and buy the business, but that's just not a great recipe for long-term success for the country.
Yeah. I want to make this as practical as possible so that people watching the podcast and listening to the podcast can, use some of these examples in their own business experience. And a question to you, Anne. You established your own medical device company in 1998, which gained international recognition for introducing a new product to treat cancer patients. And now that product is distributed around the world. Can you tell us how you managed that company through the startup phase, the growth phase, and then kept it going long term?
So it's a slightly different business model because we subcontract manufacture. So we work with a manufacturer that does all of our manufacturing. So we kind of have a good relationship with and that was because I don't have a technical background. So I used that external expertise to bring in that technical background so that I didn't have to have that. When you're starting up and growing a business, you've got to have that belief in yourself. You have to bring in people around you who are more experienced than you and fill the gaps that you have. And you have to be honest with yourself about what gaps do you have and what are you good at and what are you not good at. I mean, I'm hopeless at detail. I don't do detail. So I employ someone. You handle that. Yeah, I employ someone that does detail because otherwise I spend too much time trying to make myself do it. So you have to learn what you're good at and what you need to do and what you need to let go of. You need to bring good people around you. And you also need to keep growing. So you don't want to sort of get to a point and stop.
Yeah.
So you need to be constantly looking, well, what's next? What's the next strategy? For me, it's the next market that we go to from an international perspective. With a medical product, we're under constant pressure, regulatory pressure. So we're always trying to upgrade the regulations. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff that goes on. So, listen to people, keep growing, bring in the skills that you need when you need them, and keep moving.
So a final question to you, Anne. Knowing what you know now in that, story arc that goes from teacher through to medical applications, you name it, venture capital, etc. From what you've learned over that journey, what would you tell your younger self to give yourself some confidence in the early? What's the thing that you've learned that you wish you'd taken on board much earlier in your career?
I think when I realised the importance and the art of asking a good question, and a question that was going to make the person that you're posing the question to think. In the engineering world, it's about asking questions. The engineer will come to me and say, well, I can save half the cost of this component if we do this. And I would say, oh, that's a good idea. We're going to save half the cost. Yeah, do that. Whereas now I'd say, well, how much is the component? And it's 2 cents. Well, were you going to save me a cent? No. Whereas in my younger days, I would have said, well, that sounds like a good idea. We're going to save half. So asking that question is that, well, and what will I have to do in order to get that saving? How much is it going to cost? What are we going to scrap? how long will it take to get it? How many suppliers do we have? All of those things that I didn't know to start with. So instead of going with gut reaction. And the other thing is that, and this is the same in the venture capital world, everyone thinks that the window is closing. The window is closing. If I don't do it fast, the window. And I think the windows are always closing. But take your time to make good decisions. Take time to listen to the people around you. Take time to get good people on your team. Don't make knee-jerk reactions and bring in people who are not a good fit because you think you need them. So what we've learned, what we've learned in the centre, that a good team is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
So take your time in bringing in the right people with the right skills. And at the moment, getting skilled people is really hard. Everyone that we work with says it's hard to find people. So you're always on the lookout for good people. And that might mean that you've got to bring someone in before you're ready, but it's the right person. So you've got to make room for them and bring them in, because you can't afford to miss good people.
Yep.
Great advice. And thanks very much for your time today. A remarkable story, Ryan. Thank you again. Yeah, many lessons there to be learned. Thank you for your time. Thanks for your company today. If you'd like more information about the issues raised in this podcast or other related topics, please visit our website at www.centreforbusinessgrowth.com. And a quick reminder that you can always tune in to the Growth Trust podcast on Spotify, Google, Apple or YouTube. Bye for now.